Was being a scientist always the dream? How did that play out for you?
So originally I actually wanted to go into dramatic arts because I am quite flamboyant.
And you like money.
And I like money, not that science has any money in it, fun fact. Ended up deciding, well, let me go be a vet. I love animals, and then I got to varsity and realized with these nails I am definitely not sticking them up an animal's butthole. So
just show the nails quickly. Just show the nails.
I don't know where I should be looking.
Yeah, I can't do no small talk, no small talk. I'm not with the small talk. Can't be with the small talk.
So I'm really excited. I'm sitting opposite someone I don't actually know at all. I met her about 17 years ago. Jeanine du Plessis, she is a scientist at Hani Baragwanath Hospital, and she works at a research unit there. Jay, I'm going to call you Jay because that's what I know you as. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's so great to be here.
So, there's so much to unpack here. So I think it's important for me to mention that you are currently doing your master's as well as working at this unit, and you are doing your master's on COVID-19 up into the fourth wave. Now, let's just start with what you do at this unit, what you did before COVID hit.
So, as you mentioned, I work at a research unit at Hani Baragwanath Hospital, and I work on a whole bunch of global studies as well as local studies, predominantly fixated on neonatal health and pregnant women. A lot of our studies were based on this before COVID hit. So as COVID hit, the unit started focusing more on COVID-related studies, vaccine efficacy trials. So that's pretty much what we do now. Now that COVID has somewhat slowed down a bit, we're looking more at expanding again and going back to some of our other studies on pneumonia and pregnancy health.
So let's talk about that moment where you heard that you were going to be one of the COVID teams at the unit. Like when you were walked into that room, because COVID hit, and what was it like the next day?
Yeah, pretty much. So it was a surreal experience because there were these, the deadly coronavirus, and you're hearing this all over the news, and it was quite terrifying, but also not so terrifying for people that are in like the medical and scientific field. This is something that is exciting. It is different. It's what we've studied to do. So we work with a relatively big group of scientists, technicians, and technologists, and obviously based on lockdown restrictions and just the sheer size of the unit itself, it isn't plausible for all of these individuals to be working during lockdown. So anyway, about 4 of us were called into a room with our supervisors, and it was very much like a candid conversation. Like, hey guys, as you know, the coronavirus is here. We've had our first confirmed case, and lockdown is going to be implemented. So we have selected you guys to run this unit, run this lab, the 4 of you.
Hectic.
So strap in, get ready, don't be scared. This is what, you are here to do. We are going to equip you as well as we can, as well as anyone can during this pandemic, because we don't have resources, we don't have time. The time is now. So, it was a scary moment, but also very exciting, very surreal. I remember going into my last day of normal work with the whole unit, and everyone was nervous because it's almost like, is everyone going to get paid? Is everyone not going to get paid?
Had they announced COVID or the lockdown at this point?
No, so not yet. So lockdown, I think, was mentioned that next day, where we were all, I think it was a Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. So we were all at work. They called the whole unit in, and our seniors just said, okay, guys, well, look, these are the 4 people that will be running the lab. They will be, doing what they need to do. The rest of you will all go home. And I'll never forget one of the senior scientists asking, so what does that mean in terms of the rest of us, like getting paid? Like, we don't know how long this lockdown's going to be. We don't know anything. And it was hectic for the senior members of the staff because they didn't have any answers to almost say, well, guys, we don't know, but we'll have to let you know. But for now, get on out. Those that are working, go collect your permits. Like, you got to do what you got to do. And we ended up staying. Originally, we were going to leave quite early. You want to go see your family. You want to, mentally prepare yourself for what is going to happen, because it's not like it would be a normal day going forward. We would work shift hours. So you would come in and you would just work. The next shift would come in. You don't really get to speak to these people that you were, once colleagues and friends with. It becomes like a full-on grind. So we were waiting for our permits that ended up coming to the unit quite late. And I remember driving home and phoning my dad, who is older and also had diabetes. So it's a bit of like a scary moment. You don't really know anything, and everyone looks at you to have these answers. And I was driving, and I remember that's when I started crying, because that fear of going, okay, well, everyone's looking at you because now you're working on this virus. You don't really know what's going on. And I had a good cry, and he was like, you know what, this must have happened for a reason. You walked into this field, you're as well equipped as you can be, and you're going to learn from this. And when I tell you that next day when we got in, it wasn't just like we were scientists. We were data capturers. We were medical professionals. We were reaching out to doctors directly, giving results. And I remember walking into the actual hospital. There were these COVID wards, and, you know, almost what was going to be these isolation wards. And throughout the course of the early stages of the pandemic, these wards were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we were actually working with cardiologists at that point, and they were going to be the specialists that were going to take the swabs for these COVID positive patients. So we were there when the very first COVID positive patient was in Baragwanath Hospital.
Wow.
And everyone put on their PPE. We were there from the technical point of view to say, okay, well, once the swab is taken, what do we do with it? How do we store it? So yeah, that was really cool. So every day when you got into work, you had to gear up into what looks like a really hideous raincoat.
Okay.
It was so hot. It was so hot. And you would walk far into these isolation wards to go and collect almost a cooler bag with ice blocks with all of these swabs in it. The forms, you would walk all the way back to the lab, and you'd have to completely decontaminate. I mean, we started working with excessive amounts of bleach. Like, you know, your hands as a scientist are always relatively dry because you're working with alcohol and bleach. But oh my goodness, it was a crusty situation, to say the least. It was real crusty.
Honestly, this sounds like a scene from the movies almost. You know, I can imagine you guys in these like suits, like, no?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like that for sure. I'm pretty sure we just looked like really uncomfortable, sweaty people complaining the whole way through, like, I better not get COVID from this.
Oh my goodness. But no, so you would essentially run those, you would take the swabs and then you would run them, and then those results you would then give off to who?
So you would give them off to the main doctors that were working in these wards. So the whole purpose was to almost find out, okay, is this person really positive? Are we infecting them? Obviously, you look at someone based on a symptom like notion. So do they have the symptoms of the coronavirus? If yes, we will swab them, we will test them. We can figure out at what point of the disease they are at, and then we will cluster them or group them according to, you know, the severity of their disease. You don't want to have a person that has symptoms of COVID but doesn't actually have COVID in a ward, because then you're just allowing them to contract the virus. And also you want to get the results to them relatively quickly so that you don't let them go and now they've come into contact and now they're going to go and infect a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
So I think that was an important, you know, moment to literally, but we get given a participant number. So to almost link that participant number to a doctor from a ward by literally going through pages and pages of documents, because you now have to take these documents, put them on, you know, an online database so that everything gets linked sort of like electronically. But that takes time, that takes people. You know, I will say we were very lucky during the course of the pandemic. We started bringing more and more people in. So it almost became like we weren't data capturers and, you know, transporters and scientists and reporters and all this kind of stuff. We started getting more and more people in so that it was very streamlined. Mm-hmm. But the beginning part of it, you know, you did everything. We were creating packs that we would send to the various wards to do the testing. And it was hectic. It was a very intense moment for me as a scientist, for me as a person who has, you know, siblings and parents and friends that may be at risk. But it definitely molded me into who I am today.
So, I mean, obviously, I know you, and we spoke throughout the whole, what is it now, lockdown, the whole time. Mm-hmm. I mean, you called me every day, sometimes laughing, most likely crying, if I'm honest with you, because it was intense. But something I'll never forget is you had a lot of insight as to what was going on. If there was a new, what would you call it, strain?
Yeah, variant.
New variant, thank you. Don't know the terms. And that's why Janine is here. So whenever there was a new variant, whenever we were maybe going into a new lockdown, you knew all of that before it was happening. How did that, was that difficult to keep a secret? I mean, essentially you didn't with me, but...
Well, I didn't really keep it a secret, to be very honest with you. I think the biggest failure, I think, in any system is trying to keep something like that a secret. Information is knowledge. And as long as you are spreading the correct information, that's not gossip. So to tell someone, look, you know, and I was with my lab partner, we were driving back at maybe 10 o'clock in the evening from Barra, and we decided we were going to carpool together. She was, going to work with me on the COVID surveillance project. And we were driving together, and we had just been informed that lockdown is going to be extended. Now, I hadn't seen my sister in a month. She hadn't seen her brother in a month, or her Oma. And I remember phoning my sister and getting quite choked up and being like, this is going to suck because I'm not going to see you for an indefinite, amount of time. And I decided, just tell everyone as much as you can, as much that is true, so that they can have those moments where they can phone their loved ones and say, look, I miss you. Because I think a lot of the time we get sort of wrapped up in our own feelings and we miss the human element of it. Like, pick up the phone and say, it sucks not seeing you. I miss you. How are you? Everyone was doing these, online,
parties.
Yeah, parties, quizzes.
Over Zoom.
Yeah, everything. Those were honestly the worst.
No,
I felt so uncomfortable doing them. I remember the one day I was even like, guys, this makes me feel weird. Is no one else feeling weird? And they're like, Janine, stop it. Like, we are trying to be social here.
Just trying to cope, man.
I'm sitting on my own outside. Like, this is great.
Let's talk a little bit about the recognition, or rather the lack of recognition that you feel, and that I also noted scientists got during the pandemic. We heard from the president every once in a while, and there was a lot of the healthcare workers who are the doctors and the nurses, but they never really spoke about the people who were running those tests, the scientists.
Look, that was hella surprising for me because, we all watched family meetings, sit down, get ready with your popcorn. You never know what's going to happen. And when the acknowledgements started being handed out, you almost expected the scientists, the technicians, the technologists, the researchers that are working on this to be acknowledged. And it was quite devastating when it didn't happen. And the more these meetings would go on, the more you would wait to hear, is there going to be any type of recognition that is going to happen? And there wasn't, which obviously did suck, until all of the vaccines, research into the vaccines came out. And then there was one acknowledgement, I'll never forget it, to say thank you to the scientist. And, I think the beauty of science in itself, or even being a medical professional, is not the acknowledgement that you get, but the reason why you're doing it. Look, it's always nice to be acknowledged. You don't always get acknowledged. So that moment made it all worth it for me. But what made it even more worth it for me was not the acknowledgement, but knowing, okay, well, you are actively part of changing the world right now. And that is a huge flex to have as a, 26-year-old. That's great.
Did you always know that you wanted to change the world when you were younger?
Yes, I certainly did.
Okay, so was this the dream? Was being a scientist, obviously not necessarily during a pandemic, was being a scientist always the dream? How did that play out for you?
So originally I actually wanted to go into dramatic arts because I am quite flamboyant and love to sing and act and dance. And then I realized, okay, maybe, I'm good at mathematics. Maybe I should go and be a vet instead.
And you like money.
And I like money, not that science has any money in it, fun fact. So ended up deciding, well, let me go be a vet. I love animals. And then, I got to varsity and realized with these nails, I am definitely not sticking them up an animal's butthole. So
just show the nails quickly.
Hey,
just show the nails.
I don't know where I should be looking.
But how do you you have to wear gloves. How does that work? Do they often pop through?
100% they do. It's the weirdest thing. Everyone always asks me, and I'm expecting this hard-hitting question about something super scientific, and it's like, I just want to ask you, how do you work with those nails? I'm like, guys, come on. It's 2022. We can do anything if we want to, man.
I love that. So you worked at Hani Baragwanath Hospital, as I mentioned, at a unit there. And I'm just going to call it Barra because honestly, my tongue slips over that long sentence. But we know that Barra has quite a, what is it now? It doesn't really, it's not always shown or portrayed in the best light. Obviously, it's a government hospital. It does serve most of South Africa. It's one of the biggest hospitals in South Africa, but it is neglected to a certain degree. I want to know, during COVID specifically, what are some of the most hectic things, or what is one really hectic thing that you experienced at the hospital tied to COVID?
Okay, so where we would go and collect our samples was by the resuscitation unit, and I think I'm a scientist. I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't really handle death very well. I handle things like rectal swabs, so I can handle smell really well, but what is it with respect to death and really sick people, that's always been something that's really hard for me to see and not do anything, because I'm not a doctor. I don't know what to do. And I think one of the worst moments for me was going to collect some swabs and walking out and seeing someone completely flatline. And obviously there I am wearing my scrubs. Everyone there thinks I am a doctor. This is a very normal thing that you see in a hospital. It's almost like there's like this chain of command and everyone knows what to do, and you're just standing there literally going, I feel out of place. Can anyone show me where the swabs are? Like, I hate to bother you, but someone's dying and I cannot stop looking. So that was really hectic. I remember leaving the unit and just like white as a sheet and saying, okay, well, I don't know what just happened. My friend asked me, are you okay? And I said, I just saw someone die. Like, wow, this is really hectic. So there were lots of heavy moments that happened. I think one of the big ones is seeing people at the units get really sick from COVID. One of the ladies that was around about my age, super healthy, was hospitalized due to severe illness. We did a couple of media-related things, and we worked with Oxford University, and one of the most beautiful videos that we participated in shows a very real, raw moment where one of our staff members said, we're working with, we're doing an autopsy almost on these bodies that have died from COVID. And you look at this person, you see the surname, and you go, I think this is my colleague's family.
Oh, no.
And that was the most surreal moment, to go, you're working not with just strangers right now, you're working with people that you know. So it was intense. It was sad. Obviously, the lack of resources was terrifying. N95s in general were difficult to find. Our unit was really good in getting us some, but we would have to decontaminate them ourselves. You got one N95 mask, and because we are the lab, we had to clean maybe 8 or 9 different units within the hospital. We are people that are working directly with participants that have tested positive. We are there. We are UVing their masks. We are incubating their masks, and we're all learning, in this whole period. So yeah, there were lots of heavy moments that had happened during the course of COVID, and there still are sometimes heavy moments where you think that everything's gone, and then you realize, okay, well, you've just published in this paper and this involves, 600 pediatric deaths as a result of COVID, and you think, okay, well, I was dealing with a lung sample in this process. When you read the paper, you think to yourself, looks like a piece of mince to you while you're working on it. I know that's gross, but
Wow.
When you look back and you're like, every piece of mince you worked with was a dead participant, a dead person, and that's hectic.
It is hectic. You say piece of mince and I kind of want to laugh, and then when you say person, I'm like, Monique, stop laughing. This is not funny at all. It's very, very real, really.
I think you just like numb it when you say things like that. Like, you have to actually look past what you are working with. Like, obviously there's a lot of respect for the samples that you're working with, from the patients that are giving their lives to science for us to better the world. But you also have to sit there in that moment just as a human being and go, how am I going to do this without having a complete mental breakdown? So I know even when I train someone, I'm like, don't overthink it right now. Like, have immense respect for the sample that you're working on, but literally look at it like a piece of meat. Like, it's the only way you can do this right now, and make sure whatever outcome you get is a true outcome, and you've worked with respect with the sample.
Yeah, look, you got to do what you got to do in those moments. Let's talk a little bit more about being a woman in science in South Africa. There's a lot of parts there. Being a woman in South Africa is one thing. Being a woman in science is one thing. And then being a woman in science in South Africa is another thing. What is that like for you?
Well, to be honest with you, everyone thinks that science is like a predominantly male-driven field. I do believe that is changing. I always get asked this question a lot when I get interviewed, and I think that it really depends on your own mindset when it comes to it. Being a woman in science hasn't really changed much for me because I have taken every opportunity that I can. It certainly hasn't given me anything or taken anything away from me. I think it's the smaller things, as we mentioned earlier, the whole nail thing. How do you work with those nails? Well, how do you not work with those nails? So, you get like a little bit of discrimination every now and again with respect to the way that you look or the length of your nails. But other than that, I mean, I do think, I mean, and I'm really proud of science is always about like evolution and how things are changing and how we're adapting. And I personally feel maybe it's just the incredible team that I work with. But I feel like we've all evolved, and being a woman in my team doesn't make it any different to being a man in my team. So it's been great. It's been awesome.
I mean, that's fantastic to hear. So let's then look at labs in South Africa. I obviously know stories. I can't even pretend. So tell me, what is it like working in a lab in South Africa?
Well, it depends on which lab you go to.
A public lab.
Let's
put it like
lab.
that. Maybe one of the units at the hospital at Barra.
Well, look, I mean, it's difficult to say because every lab has its high and its low. There's always areas that one can improve, and it's difficult to sit here and say something bad about one lab and good about another. And I have traveled and gone to like many, many different labs, but I think in general, the worst, I think, worst labs that I have seen, or lab that I have seen, it's a lot of like a cleanliness issue. I think for me, the absolute worst was, working on or attending a lab where they were working on placenta. And it almost was, you usually put placenta in formalin to almost fix it.
What is formalin?
Formalin is, it's kind of what you could imagine you preserve like an organ or something, and when it's dead, to do testing on, to make it not smell bad or rot. That's like the whole purpose of it. And so some of the placentas were not put in formalin, and there was just like this extreme stench of rotting flesh, and then you look and you're like, oh no, that container is swollen and green and something's gonna explode. Something's living in there, guys. Like, this needs to be changed immediately. But this kind of stuff does happen because I think a lot of our labs, we work 24/7. There's always a deadline. We always are rushing to find the next great thing that's going to change the world. So it's easy that something so small can be forgotten. I mean, typically a piece of meat or an organ or something in I'm terrible right now. In formalin or formaldehyde, it doesn't stink, but it's easy to forget that. We are all but human.
I feel like you are rushing through this story, and I'm going to bring you back to it. So you see these buckets with this that are now oozing and green. How long were they there for? Where were they stored, and what ended up happening? And how do you properly dispose of it?
Okay, so what is it? They were there for a while, like maybe in excess of a month.
No,
and because there were more and more of these placentas being collected, they were being stored up into like outside of like a corridor kind of a vibe. Until eventually, like, the scientists that were working there just got like over it and packed it into what we call biohazard bins. So there are dedicated companies that actually dispose of medical waste. As far as I know, they incinerate it. So you have to be very strict about how you dispose of any type of waste. So it gets packed, it gets double bagged, it gets put in like a big biohazard carrying, medical waste container. And then, so these scientists got over it, put them in like maybe close to 100 of these biohazard bins and disposed of them accordingly. And that was the last that was, ever seen or.
Wow. I love how diplomatic you were about it, though. It's explaining how people are busy and it happens. Yeah. I mean, does it happen? Let's not get into it. I want to know from you, have you ever contracted anything from your lab before? Because I can imagine working with, for example, you mentioned pneumonia and et cetera, et cetera. Surely, I mean, I know you've gotten COVID from your lab twice.
Yeah. Well, look, from the lab, but also possibly from social habits. Like, you never know, but it's always high risk. It's always high risk working in a COVID lab. You likely will get, the virus, depending on what stage you are working,
Okay. And other things that you've contracted?
Well, I mean, every now and again, you'll get a case of like the no, it's the truth. I mean, you're working with some E. coli, if someone doesn't wash their hands, probably you touch a door handle, you're done.
No.
So, all of us getting occasionally sick, predominantly always the this is like a normal thing. But I think especially when it comes to working with really dangerous things, then you are super, super careful. You really don't want to contract, some multi-drug resistant bacteria. And that's like a lot of the stuff that we work on. So in those cases, it's like you're scrubbing your hands. So you really don't want to get these extreme drug resistant bacteria. But yeah, I mean, everyone gets a case of the maybe, and I wouldn't want to say weekly. That's a bit excessive. But like, once a month, once every second month, give or take there.
I mean, if to be a fly on the wall in these labs would honestly be the dream for me, if I'm honest with you. Like, the reporter in me is like, I must know more. So I want to kind of start wrapping this up. I hope I've asked all the important questions, if I'm honest with you, because I feel like there is so much to unpack here. But, you have actually been published quite a lot. You have been featured on CNN for coronavirus research, etc., etc. What do you feel? How do I want to word this? How does that make you feel? Because obviously the world is in devastation, but you are getting published, and that's huge for your career. Like, how did that make you feel?
Okay, I've never really thought of that, but thanks, Mon. I don't feel great right now.
I'm so sorry.
What is it? So obviously, to be published is amazing. It's a great feeling. It's great to get recognition. But again, the whole world is in devastation. But a lot of this being published, it's not about the acknowledgement. It's about the research that is being published, about the fact that this is going to change, the way that we look at the virus and the fear that is instilled in people. So for me, I feel great being published. I feel great about, the research and the knowledge that's being put out there. And I think it's important to convey that not only in a journal article or on a CNN, type of interview, but to your friends and to your families, and, just so that everyone stops fearing the things that they don't know and rather just equips themselves with the knowledge to deal with everything. And I think that's the beauty of publications and, TV time, to show, we're all human, and, there are a group, the world is in devastation, but there are a group of people that are trying to make it better.
Oh, I just got goosebumps. That was real good. So I think that perfectly, to me, answers the question of, would you have done anything differently despite the effects it has had on your mental health?
So yeah, I mean, having COVID and, seeing so much sadness in the world and in the units that you work and, in Soweto, it does make you very sad. And I've struggled quite excessively with my mental health over the past 2 years. But luckily I have a friend like you that always keeps me woke about,
Stop it, man.
There we go. Shout out to Mon. But no, I wouldn't have changed anything. I think we're here. We handled the situation the best that we can. We have lost lives, but it's important to note that those lives are not lost in vain. It's sad because, like, if you think about losing someone, it's, grief that you feel. But I think with COVID, it was grief that the world felt. So we're all grieving together. And right now we're all, we're getting up together, which is the beauty of it all. And I think I wouldn't change anything, because this pandemic and working in it and, being on the forefront of science really has made me understand, like, the value of the people, not only in our country, but in the world. Like, it's made me feel like we are more one and we are more unified and we are actually stronger and more knowledgeable together in every field.
Oh, Janine for president. Am I right? So what is next for you, Jeanine du Plessis? Tell me.
So next for me, I hope to submit my master's and graduate by the end of the year. Makes me nervous saying this on a podcast now, because I'm like, now it needs to be done. So that's super exciting. Other than that, I would obviously love to continue my academic career into a PhD in molecular virology, and obviously just continue to work on upcoming diseases and sort of like prevention and understanding of these diseases. So I will likely stay in this field forever because I am really intrigued by the notion of disease and transmission of disease. So yeah.
Since we're manifesting, before we end this off, Nobel Peace Prize? What do you want to win? What do you want to win?
I mean, one day if we could win a Nobel Prize, that would be amazing. But okay. This has always been my dream since I was like a wee minor.
There we go.
So let's manifest that. Hey,
that's exactly
to discover, to study, and to create something or find something so magnificent that they can't help but give us money and awards, yo.
And if you get money, I get money, and I love that for us. So I just want to say, Janine, you are amazing. You have done so many amazing things, and I mean, you're only 26 years old. God forbid I say you're you're 27 because you're only 27 in a month. And you never let me forget that.
I hate it when you do this.
But I honestly, like, I think on behalf of everyone, we want to say thank you to you and to the scientists who are doing these amazing things that we don't even know about. Like, I don't even think people realize. And I think that's why it's been so important for me to have this conversation with you. So I just want to say I'm proud of you. I'm proud of every single scientist out there. Thank you for everything. And I look forward to seeing what's next.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. And guys, all scientists out there, do you hear the recognition that we all deserve? You're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't do no small talk, no small talk. I'm not with the small talk. Can't be with the small talk.